are back live now with two new panelists. Matilda's really running the show today. So excited to have these next two guests. You saw Brad earlier, but we have a new person joining us, Lex Beckham. She is with the national organization, and we're going to talk all about what the future of volunteering looks like all across this country, but especially here in Nevada. So Matilda, you're up again. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. I told you I would see you right after the break. I just wanted to start before I move into our pleasantries and to the real show of it. I just wanted to state for the record that if you wanted to shoot your shot or find out what shade of lipstick I wear or the brand, you have to slide in our DMs at Battleborn Progress on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or on TikTok, and then we can talk. Now that we got that out of the way, I just wanted to say that I learned so much from the previous panel. The moderator was amazing. I definitely am now going to be starting my own fan club. So if you would like to join, you can join by following us at Paddleboard Progress on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and TikTok. And I also hope that you all fell in love more with the Lieutenant Governor and Emmy Ruiz as much as we all did. And for the friends who I have yet to have meet, my name is Matilda Guerrero. I use she, her, Oya pronouns, and I'm the digital manager at Battleborn Progress. And before I reintroduce you all to my friends, I am pumped to tell y'all, and I'm going to do a dramatic pause, so issue the drum roll, that the future of volunteering is here. And this morning we talked and we learned all about fake news and disinformation, and I'm sure you're probably wondering, how can I do my part? Well, we've got you covered. During this session, we're going to tell you all how you can do that from your kitchen table. And today we're joined by my friends Brad Bauman from Fireside Campaigns and Lex Beckham from Progress Now Nationals. So Brad, my favorite Netflix star, please introduce yourselves and the friends in the chat.
It is so good to be back with you, and it's so good to see you again. I'm Brad Bauman, and I'm the CEO of Fireside Campaigns, and I am an old friend of Battleborn Progresses, and I work with the National Progress Now on a social organic project that we'll be talking a decent amount about today.
Thank you, Brad. And if there are any cat cameos, please don't hesitate to share that. And now Lex, to our friends, please.
Hello, I'm Lex Beckham. I use she, her pronouns as well, and I'm the content creator for Progress Now National on the campaign that we're working on that Brad mentioned. And I also love cat cameos, if you will.
So I just wanted to state that now my new favorite summit memory is the term cat meows. So if you have a cat at home, I want you to go on Twitter right now, snap a quick pic of your baby, and then use the hashtag cat meow with the hashtags Nevada Summit, and then we're going to see all your babies. So now let's get into the real book bit. We talked a lot about disinformation and the need for volunteering today. And now more than ever, we need to lean on our neighbors for support, for friendship, and yes, for trusted sources as we navigate an increasingly polarized political world. And here at BVP, we know that we can be those trusted messengers, but we can't do it alone. And that's why we're currently working on organizing a dedicated team of volunteers and advocates to help us here at BVP educate our community about issues that we care most about. From gun violence prevention, LGBTQ plus equality, climate change, tax fairness policies, affordable housing, those are just to name a few. And this is just one of the many programs that BVP stays in the front lines of communication innovations, and we're only able to do that with folks like you. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad to tell us all about this amazing program.
Thank you very much, Matilda. So, one of the interesting developments of the last 5 years, 6 years or so is I think we're all getting a sense that news media is changing, that the ways in which we are communicating with one another is changing, that folks are by and large not necessarily listening to the same outlets that we used to listen to. Folks all over the country are also not necessarily listening to officials anymore. We live in a time where because of the speed of communications and because of the ways in which the world has changed, and because we now find ourselves in a position where we're inundated with a lot of disinformation and misinformation, more and more people are turning to folks just like them as trusted sources. Friends, relatives, the people who you interact with at the grocery store, that you see on a day-to-day basis at work friends. We live in an age now where those people's voices are actually playing a much larger and a much bigger role in determining how folks are receiving political information than ever before. We started seeing this happen in a big way in 2014, 2015, and 2016, where, as we were looking at poll data, we started seeing that people just simply didn't trust cable news. And then that got even worse as time went on, when I think a lot of us, not only we always hear the stories about folks on the right who don't trust cable news, but I think a lot of us were very much turned off by the both-sidisms, where a lot of news media really tries to present both sides, but in reality feel like they're not calling out the bad people. And so this has really moved a lot of people away from trusting those things. And one of the things that I think a lot of folks, both at Progress Now and a lot of folks at different organizations nationally, and even a lot of campaigns have said, were that the ways in which aligned organizations or political campaigns chose to communicate just weren't doing it anymore. They weren't moving the mark. They weren't changing people's minds, and they weren't reaching the people who really needed to hear from them. So it got a bunch of folks thinking, well, what if we put together a system where we would find folks who are interested in talking about progressive values, who are interested in telling how the news of the day affects them and their families, would be willing to connect with their friends and their relatives online through Facebook and through TikTok and through Instagram and on Twitter and on text, to really talk about the progressive views that we hold, but really through the lens of personal stories. And we realized that given everything that's happening in the news media and given everything that's happening with communications, if we brought those together, we might actually be able to significantly increase the reach of progressive messages to places where folks aren't getting those messages, and that we might be able to actually create a counterbalance to a lot of the misinformation and disinformation and kind of the right-wing ecosphere that has been created in order to keep people listening to non-stop right-wing perspective on the world, which, as we know, is now degrading our democracy, taking truth away from the center of our debate, making things much more difficult and cleaving people apart to where we're just not talking to each other anymore. Well, this is an opportunity to actually talk to one another again and do it in compassionate ways, and to do it in ways that feel really, organic to your lived experience. And so that's what this program is, Matilda.
One of the great things about this program is that this is a way for folks to connect with people that they most care about, from their neighbors, from their family, friends, and honestly, even like a specific niche of communities that they like. With this program, we're able to combat disinformation and fill in the more proactive messaging with content that speaks to folks in the way where it reaches people and touches on their feelings, just as Ronald just said in the previous not in the previous one, the session before that. And it's a great way for people to get together and to honestly fight fake news from the comfort of their home and straight from their kitchen table. If you're interested in this program, my friends, my family, my BBP family will drop in the sign up sheet in the chat. But in the meantime, I know that a lot of you all may have some questions from this amazing panel. I certainly do have some questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. But Brad, I have a question for you first. Can you tell us why did Progress Now decide to invest in resources into putting together an organic social media program?
Absolutely, Matilda. That's a great question. Well, I think the first thing that I'll say is that the title of this panel pretty much says it all. This is the future. And the truth is that as long as we are in a world in which we are all communicating via social media and across different platforms and at the speed of light, and kind of living in a world in which folks are trading clips and folks are trading memes and folks are sharing videos with each other all day long, we're going to be in a place where every one of these opportunities is also an opportunity for us to gently remind people what it is we stand for and why we stand for those things, and to make sure that folks kind of understand our perspective on the world. And so Progress Now kind of was looking at the ways that communicators communicate across the country. And of course, from its perspective as being kind of like a centerpiece of the progressive infrastructure nationally that helps to coordinate communications across the country and in states, there was a real opportunity to say, how can we innovate? How can we take advantage of new technology? How can we also take advantage of the ways that people are listening to other people? How can we really leverage those things so that we can kind of move progressives out of this mindset of, hi, I'm a press secretary. I'm going to go call a reporter. I'm going to get a story placed. That story is going to tell the truth, and then people are going to read it and think the way that I think. It doesn't work anymore. And so instead, it's how can we take organizing and everything that our movement understands and knows about how we activate people and really ensure that they're activated and that they feel comfortable and that they feel prepared and that they feel armed with the sort of good content and tactics around storytelling that really allow them to make a case to their friends and relatives, to the crazy uncle who shows up during Thanksgiving and is, poking and prodding all of the other family members at the table. And wouldn't it be great to just be ready and, kind of with compassion and love, be able to be like, yeah, but you know what? It's kind of not the way the world works. This is. And kind of getting that moment where even if nobody else is saying anything, everybody's kind of nodding along because you kind of won the argument. But we want to do it at scale.
Because of this program, I'm going to be 100% honest with you all. This is actually one of my favorite programs, and the organic content that Lex has made and the content that we've been able to make in-house, I've been posting them to my own social media platforms, and I cannot begin to tell you how many times I've gotten like a message or a phone call from a relative asking me about it. For example, the other night at dinner, my husband's grandfather asked me, his name is Rick, he goes, Matilda, can you talk to me about like public lands work? Can you tell me can you explain to me what a viclimate is? Can you tell me what this whole process is like? So we're engaging in those conversations and informing other people about them. And right after I got off that phone call with him, he immediately, and I know that this is to be true because he's one of those people, he got on the phone with his other friends and he says, you will never believe what I just talked about. And he proceeded to talk about those things, and that's how change happens. Change happens by meeting community members where they're at and having those one-on-one conversations with them and and honestly giving them everything that they need to know about a specific topic in a way that's digestible and memorable, and in a way where they can continue communicating it. We're playing a game of telephone, but in this case, we're playing a telephone game where we know we have really good service. Alrighty, and then Brad, I have another question since we're talking about tools. What are some of the tools and strategies that you use to encourage participation in this project? Tell us, because it's a good project and people need to know.
So there are a couple of them. First, I am going to let Lex talk about, because Lex, we're so lucky to have Lex as part of this project. A consummate creator who is able to take really complicated problems and put them into content that is digestible and easy to understand and sticky in people's minds. And so I'll let her talk all sorts about that. But a couple of the other things that we have really brought to the fore on this project is organizers. You're if you're participating in a project like this, you're not participating in it on your own. It's almost like you have your own communications concierge, somebody who is there to talk through with you how you might want to tell stories, to direct you to resources, to give you kind of guidance, to allow you to kind of sound off to them and maybe come up with something through, just talking it through that is really gonna kind of make a difference. Give you help when or if, folks are, trolling you for, a response. Whatever the case may be, that's part of what we're bringing to it. And then finally, the other thing that I will say, and that folks will really get a chance to experience in a few weeks, we are building a portal that will allow folks to find effortlessly content across all platforms that touch on all sorts of issues and from different perspectives, different emotional states, so that you can really find the sort of content that helps to illustrate your perspective and that you can riff off of and add to and be able to communicate around in a way that your friends, your relatives, and everybody else will respond to.
Y'all heard it straight from here. This is the first time ever that I'm hearing this, but within the next couple weeks, we're going to have some new tools, new graphics, new content. But the only way that you can join in on the fun is by signing up. And my BBP family is going to drop that sign up link in the chat, so make sure you fill it out and we can make change together. And now, bringing it over to Lex. Lex, you have an amazing background. As a fellow Gen Z person myself, it's really important to see folks, especially young folks, do their part to fight the good fight. Can you tell us what encourages you to create big changes in our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Chicago, and then I moved to a small town in Southern California when I was about 6. And where I live is not very friendly to people like me, unfortunately. So growing up in this community has really made me understand what's going on in other communities. And then when I got into about high school, I started getting more involved in community service works. I joined the March for Our Lives, and I led my high school's march in 2018. And out of high school, I started getting even more involved in community service and different works. And I then started having a following on TikTok with over 250,000 followers, and just talking against the status quo and discussing different topics that I think are just so important that people aren't discussing. And the encouragement I've gotten from my peers and people older than me, younger than me, it's insane. And people want to hear what's going on in the world. And I'm happy to be the vessel to harvest it, and being able to talk about it really encourages me. I just want to be able to spread such important information to everyone.
It's interesting that you bring up TikTok, because our fearless leader, Annette Magnus, is always talking about how she's down to do whatever TikTok dance that I want. So I am looking forward to seeing the next TikTok dance that goes, y'all can't see her, but she just gave me a really big thumbs up and a really big smile that she's so excited to do the latest TikTok dance. So whatever Noah Beck is doing is what Annette will be doing soon. So make sure that you follow us at Battleborn Progress to keep up with that. My next question for you, Lex, is as a primary content creator for this program, how do you prioritize content topics at the national level? Like, how do you know what should we talk about this week, and how should we convey that message?
Yeah, so I start with my week going down what's going on in the news and what's happened over the weekend, and I prioritize what's like the biggest news. I would say that what's the main topic that's going on, and then throughout the week, there's always different stories and different things that I feel like should be talked about, whether it's education or women's rights, anything that's in between that I think that just should be pushed out to the public is what is kind of getting discussed. Or anything that we have state affiliates trying to talk to us about, saying that they want us to discuss, we do that too.
That's awesome. And then I'd like to know, mainly because like whenever I'm looking through the portal, I'm seeing so many amazing new things. Which content has been your favorite? Like, what specific message has been your favorite thing to convey about, and what have you learned the most?
I really enjoy talking about women's rights. When we talk about Roe v. Wade and what's going on with that, I'm excited to talk about such a serious situation, but also in a way how Brad was talking about it, digestible. Sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on in the world and what's actually the information that's going out, because there's so many people talking, whether it's your family, whether it's news, the school, everywhere people are talking. So trying to understand what's going on is really important, and in a way that some people can't have the access to it in longer formats. So I really like having that short amount of content. I also do like making content that's like video focused, but right now I'm focusing on just like graphics, and I really enjoy it.
I'm going to tell you all this right now. Lex makes some of the most amazing graphics. So if you haven't already, I know I've plugged this in many times, but I am all for shameless plugs. You all have to sign up for this program. It's an amazing way to to learn new stories, to learn directly from community members, and honestly to make a big difference in our communities. I'm going to tell you all this right now. In my previous life, before I joined the VBP family, I spearheaded a statewide voter protection program. I worked with lots of volunteers on the ground, and I was actually able to make a very lifelong friend. I know that she's watching right now, so Jordan, this is my big shout out to you. Hello. So if you want to volunteer and make some more lifelong friends, please sign up for this program. And I just saw this in the chat. For anyone wondering, this is the lipstick that everyone keeps talking about. Yes. So Lex, another question for you is, do you have any advice for folks who are trying to make their own organic content to combat dis and misinformation?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is fact checking your content, making sure that what you're saying is what's going on. Even a trusted source can make mistakes sometimes, so making sure that you're using reliable sources and even double checking on other places. Articles can even update their writings. Something that happened at 12 can change at 3 o'clock, depending on what's going out into the world. So making sure you're staying on top of the content that you're putting out is also really important. Making sure you're just fact checking everything. Don't want to put that out there.
And then just so Annette is aware, so can you tell us what are some great tips and tricks for TikTok? So when she does her next TikTok dance, it's going to be fire.
Of course. She's nodding her head. I see it. It's amazing. Thank you, Annette. I appreciate the support. I would say making sure some small little details that can push TikTok out is making sure your lighting is good. That's something that's random, but you would assume that most people would know that, but something that's like super backlit. Like right now, the lighting, I have both my windows open and a light behind me to make sure that my lighting is fully surrounded. So making sure that, because you want to be able to see when you're swiping, because everyone just swipes really fast. So if someone's just like, woo, then you're going to look at that. Making sure that your content is kind of has a hook at the beginning. People usually, especially with social activist work or like political kind of content, some people don't necessarily want to see it that fast because they're going through, again, with their just scrolling through their TikTok, but having a hook can really get people in. And I think that's really important.
I have a very important question for you, and I think you are the only one that can answer this. Lex, can you tell us, how should I put this, Linkley? Can you tell me what your favorite volunteer experiences was like? And can you give some advice for folks who want to start volunteering but don't know how? Or don't know where?
So my favorite volunteer experience, I really like working with high schools around me. I want to be a teacher one day, and working with my community that's local is like the perfect step. Always go local, I say, is very important, because the small changes that you can make in your community are way bigger than you could ever imagine. I have hosted drives for like coffee drives for teachers at my high schools that are around me. I've done different donations, and making sure that you're just getting involved in your community is really important.
Thank you, Lex. And then Brad, I know I already told folks that you have an impressive career as a Netflix star, but you also have a very impressive career background in the movement. You're a wealth of knowledge. You're honestly a trained connoisseur. If you know, you know. And you have a lot of experience with cats, cat meows, and whatnot. Can you tell us why why volunteering is so important?
Yeah, volunteers are really what make our movement work. With all due love and respect to Annette, who does great work on behalf of the movement, the truth is that we are a movement of people. We are a movement of real people. We are a movement of volunteers. And in a world in which more and more, again, folks aren't listening to political operatives, folks aren't listening to political professionals, folks aren't listening to news media, politicians, the ability for you as a volunteer to connect with other folks around your real lived experiences, that's the way that people really create change. The truth is that, I good Lord, I'm going to take off my professional hat for a second and just talk a little bit about what it means to communicate, right? Because I think that we're all when you're a communications person, you live and die by your talking points, you're writing op-eds, you're writing all this material, you're writing facts and figures, you're trying to come up with these very reasoned arguments. But that's not really how people make decisions. People make emotional decisions first. And one of the things that I've always told, folks that I've trained to be communicators is, long after people forget the words you say, people are going to remember how you made them feel. And the truth is that as a volunteer, you have an opportunity to make the folks around you feel what our movement is really about in a way that I can't walk into a downtown. I can't walk into Elko and tell folks in the community what's going on, right? But if you're in Elko, you can. And so that's why it's so important. To go back to what Lex was saying earlier, being engaged in your community is really what matters.
Thank you, Brad. I completely agree. You have to be very engaged with the community, and that way you're able to create those relationships and help become a trusted messenger. So in that way, the great messages that you're spreading, they're going to take to their family and friends. They're going to take to their neighbors, and they're going to honestly just spread it and create more great news. And then Brad, what advice do you have for folks who are interested in volunteering but aren't sure where to start? And before you answer that, I want to see some more great questions in the chat. So put up some more questions in the chat, and then Brad and Lex are ready to answer that.
Well, the first thing I would say is, don't be afraid. The truth is that with an effort like this, folks can kind of dip their toe in the water. They're not signing up for anything that is going to be too laborious. It's not going to be a really big time commitment. It's more of the kind of volunteering that will kind of allow you to fit into 5 free minutes that you might have on a Tuesday afternoon, or you're waiting in a waiting room and you're scrolling through things on Insta already, and you're thinking about you want to post something. You might want to post something about your story and or whatnot. The truth is that all of this is kind of built in a way that is meant to allow you to feel the most comfortable. And that's part of why we have the organizers as part of this effort, because we want you to have access to the resources of folks who are skilled in telling stories, who understand kind of the ways in which you might want to make an emotional impression on someone, so you can run things by them. I think the best way to kind of explain it is, this is not kind of your standard volunteering for a political campaign where somebody's going to like put a call script in front of you and say, go for it, start calling people. It's a little bit more interactive, and it's a little bit more of an opportunity for you to learn how to be a more effective communicator while also spreading progressive messages to your friends and relatives.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that a lot. One, actually, that's a really good take. I'm going to remember that. I have a question for you, Lex. Actually, this is a question from Shelby. Shelby wants to know, how do we create content that resonates with people to cut through the disinformation from the right?
I think that's a really good question. Making sure that sometimes people don't really appeal to a pathos-based content format, and I think that's becoming kind of more of the norm as it goes on. I think people want to kind of cut through the BS in a sort of way. They want to know what's going on in the world, and they want to get straight to the point. So I think that's the best way to get to a middle ground with people, to get pushed more to an area where they're able to understand and actually be more knowledgeable of the information that you're trying to give to them.
You heard it here, folks. You got to cut through the BS and make that information digestible. Lex, I have another question from you, but this time it's from our friend Anonymous. They want to know, how can we move past our preconceived notions of people to have meaningful conversations and connections?
That is also a really good question. I think that it kind of gets down to, it's harder to do it's harder to say it to someone else if you're not feeling it yourself. So first, take a step back and understand where people are coming from. Sometimes empathy is very important, and you need to walk a little bit in someone's shoes to understand what they're doing. Of course, if something's blatantly not great, and that could be bad, but if it's something that's preconceived, you can't really control that. Everyone has unconscious biases, and you just have to recognize that you're doing that sometimes. And just take a step back and say, okay, what's actually the root of the problem here? Am I seeing them as they are, or how I think that they are?
I like that a lot, and I think that actually ties back into to the message testing panel. The more that we put out our messages, the more that we test, the more that we learn, and the more that we engage with people, the more persuasive and the more welcoming we are. And by making content easy to understand, digestible, we're able to create communities with everybody around us. Doesn't matter our different backgrounds, and doesn't matter what we think about certain things. There are specific things that we all can come together about, and by fostering these conversations, we're able to do those things. And then, Brad, I have a question for you, because I like to ask you these very thought-provoking questions, and you're the guy that I turn to all the time. That's where I'm going to get my next NFB. Brad, how do we avoid getting stuck in social bubbles where everyone already shares the same views? And I got that question from my friend Aaron in the chat.
I absolutely love that question. I think that there are several ways to do it. Some of those ways are not necessarily for the faint of heart. First, I will say, it always helps to take it upon to say to yourself, I am willing to look for the sort of stories that the right is kind of reading, or that other perspectives are kind of sharing. I do this as a matter of course in my career. One thing that most people actually don't know about me is when I get into the office in the morning, the very first thing I do is I check Drudge Report. And part of checking Drudge Report is because I am trying to visualize and I'm trying to understand the emotional state of the right. and the stories that are actually making their way through the rights ecosphere. It's also a very good way of doing that without having to watch several hours of Fox News, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. Another thing, though, that I would say is that social media, there are ways of actually doing it. But I'm going to say this with an asterisk because it's not for everyone. And so I don't want folks to just go and start changing their settings, right? So that's not really what you should do. Part of what's going on Facebook, part of what's going on in social media is that we're putting ourselves in our own walled gardens. By virtue of restricting access to our content to just friends or even friends of friends, we're actually self-imposing the echo chamber on ourselves. And one of the things that if you are really interested in kind of expanding out and expanding the conversation, you could make your content public. And by making your content public, you will encourage the algorithm as well as a lot of other things to share that information more broadly and outside of your friends and outside of those circles. I do want to caution you, though, about doing that. Folks who are very close to me know that I spent many years getting doxxed and having some really nasty things happen to me because of some of the work that I was doing combating misinformation in 2016, 2017, and 2018. And one of the double-edged swords of having my content public was that it was very easy for someone to see me on CNN or for somebody to see what folks were saying about me on Twitter or on Reddit or on 4chan or in some of the darker corners of the internet, and then very easily find me on Facebook and then start harassing me there. So all of that being said, some of it's in your control in terms of the media that you're actively seeking, which will help you to kind of get yourself more into the emotional state or understand the emotional state of the other side, which, by the way, I'll tell you, is usually based in fear, truly. Like, the more that you kind of read right-wing takes or drop into the comments or see what people are talking about, you realize that so much of what's actually going on in their minds is perpetual fear, right? Which understanding is very important, because if you're looking to emotionally connect with somebody, acknowledging their fear and acknowledging the fact that you understand their fear can be a very powerful way to cut through to what you actually want to talk about. And then, of course, it's open yourself up a little on some of these platforms to allow folks from outside of your circles to access your content.
I appreciate you acknowledging that a lot, especially because it's important that we understand that we're all human. We all face issues on a day-to-day basis, and we never really know what everyone else is going through. But that's why we have to view things with a lens of compassion and a lens of curiosity. And I think this is honestly one of the best ways to do that. And I'm actually going to segue it over to Lex for the last question that we have. So Lex, in terms of content, do you touch on content pertaining to overarching systems that overtly or inadvertently affect folks from prison industrial complexes to voting rights issues to housing affordability issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically with prison industrial complex, we haven't. But the beautiful thing about, or I haven't personally, the beautiful thing about our program is that you can come in and post any content that you think that is important. I love talking about women's rights, as I already mentioned. Education, voting rights is very important, especially since right now that is such an important thing to get out and vote. Very important message to come across. So if you want to join the program, as you already stated, it's really important because you're able to convey and get to your community and talk about different things that you're really passionate about as well.
Thank you, Lex. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brad for your final thoughts. Brad, tell the people the last thing that you ever wanted them to hear from you before you show me your cat.
Always remember that people are making decisions about politics primarily based on their fight or flight response. They're primarily making it from a self-interested point of view where they're worried about everything that is happening around them. And the more that you lead your messaging, the more that you lead your communications with compassion and love, understanding, and really truly connecting with somebody's emotional state and saying, hey, I see it, I get it, I understand where you're coming from. And then you provide them an avenue to think about the world in maybe a different way than the one in which they're thinking of. It's actually the most powerful way that we have to change people's minds. And so, don't think that every single time you sit down and talk with somebody out there who differs from you, you got to come armed with facts and figures and, it's like debate class, because it ain't. It just isn't. Debate class is important to learn if you're going to be in a court of law. But in a court of public opinion, it's much more important to understand, what drives people. What drives people is the emotionality.
What drives me? What really drives me is for folks to sign up for this stellar volunteer opportunity. If you haven't already signed up, please drop your information in the chat, and one of my very lovely friends from the BBP family will be sending you all the sign up form. And then Lex, what are your final words?
My final words is make as much content as you think that you can. Pushing out the content is what's important, and getting out your message is super important.
You all heard it straight from here, folks. Now I'm going to turn it over back to the worst person in Nevada, costume connoisseur straight from the coop, Annette Magus.
That's right, Matilda. There is my sash that Christine made me last legislative session that says the worst person in Nevada, as according to the GOP. And yeah, last week, Matilda, I was told that I am a costume connoisseur. I'm a big fan of wearing costumes, not afraid to. I also have a large in-your-face personality, which all things are true. I thought those were compliments. I'm going to add it to my Twitter bio. Or maybe my TikTok bio. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but maybe. So Matilda and I are going to be doing lots of content this session. She's going to make me do all kinds of crazy things up at session. So get ready, folks. It's going to be wild. I'm excited. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. I want to thank Brad and Lex for joining us today. I know it's late for them. They're on the East Coast, but thank you all for joining us. And we're going to be back with you with our next panel, which is all about progressives in labor and how we come together as a cohesive community to fight for workers' rights. So we're going to take about a 15-minute break, go to the tables, talk to new people. Remember to use the elevator function and go to the different floors. Meet all of our different tabling sponsors, meet all of our different sponsors, meet each other, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.